Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's panel. And Namrata, can you pause it for just a second? Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's panel on Fiction as a Mirror, How Storytelling Shapes and Challenges Power. We have a wonderful panel today, and I'd like to start off by introducing them. First, we have Sasha A. Akhtar. She's a pioneering poet, fiction author, translator, and creative writing lecturer at the University of Greenwich. Akhtar performs works internationally. Her highlights include the Poetry Wales Festival, Emirates Festival of Literature, and Rotterdam Poetry Festival. Latest writings appear in Delusine, Revista International, Prototype Annual 4, Cutpurse, Tangerine Press, Of Myths and Mothers Anthology, and Lucy Writers Platform. Her debut book of translations from Urdu, Bells, Letters, The Writings of Hijab Imtiaz with Oxford University Press, received an honorable mention for the 2024 A.K. Ramanujan Prize for book translations from South Asian languages into English. Of Necessity and Wanting, Akhtar's novella collection was shortlisted for the UBL Prize for Literary Excellence in 2023. Our next panelist is Aparna Sanyal. She holds an MA from King's College London. She's a recipient of the 14th Beullah Rose Poetry Prize by Smartish Pace. She was shortlisted for the 2018 Third Coast Fiction Prize for her story, The Rack. Her book of short stories titled Instruments of Torture was released by HarperCollins India in February 2024. It was featured on the Telegraph India's Page Turners of 2024 list, Sonali's Book Club's 12 Books to Read in 2024, and Books and Beyond podcast Best Reads of 2024. It also featured on the Amazon India fiction bestseller list and has stellar reviews in Scroll.in, The Asian Age, The Tribune, The Telegraph, Bound, The Purple Pencil Project, etc. Her debut book, Tales Told in Rhyme, Circus Folk and Village Freaks, released in October 2018, was #1 on the Amazon India Poetry bestseller list. It was a featured poetry recommendation on Sonali's Book Club and was very favorably reviewed in The Hindu, The Asian Age, The Indian Express, Midweek, etc. Aparna's publication credits include the Yearbook of Indian Poetry in English 2021, the Hong Kong Proverse Poetry Prize Anthology 2020, the Penn Review, Smartish Pace, Dunes Review, SOFTBLOW, Typehouse Literary Magazine, etc. Aparna's next work will be a novel-length work of Gothic fiction. Our next participant is Awais Khan. He is a graduate of the University of Western Ontario and Durham University. He has studied creative writing at Faber Academy in London. He is the award-winning author of the critically acclaimed In the Company of Strangers, published by Simon & Schuster, Isis Audio and Hira Books, and No Honor, published by Orenda Books. He has appeared on BBC World Service, Dubai Eye, Voice of America, Cambridge Radio, City 42, PTV Home, Sama TV, Indua TV, etc. His work has appeared in the Aleph Review, Missing Slate, The Hindu, Daily Times, and other publications. He is the founding director of the Writing Institute and has delivered talks on creative writing at Oxford University, Durham University, American University of Dubai, Canadian University of Dubai, Kinnaird College, etc. He is on the judging panel of Will Crime Simru Nobel Prize and Cheshire Nobel Prize. He was longlisted for the short story Dagger in 2022. And our next participant is Nadia Kabir Barb. She's a British Bangladeshi writer and journalist and the author of Truth or Dare, a collection of short stories published by Renard Press 2023, previously by Bengal Lights Book 2017. These stories are by turns comedic and dark, painting powerful pictures of pain, love, and empathy, as well as exploring the complexities of identity, culture, and relationships. Truth or Dare was listed in the Best of 2023 by the Indie Press Network and was a finalist for the 2024 Islands Book Award. Her stories have featured in various international literary journals and anthologies, such as Wasafiri, The Missing Slate. Can You See Me was a winner of the Audio Arcadia short story competition. She was also longlisted for the 2021 Birdport Prize Peggy Chapman Andrews First Novel Award. She was the writer-in-residence 2024 for Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals and is currently a columnist with the CILIP RPG Post-Lib Journal. Nadia has also been a long-standing columnist for the leading English-language newspapers in Bangladesh, the Daily Star and Dhaka Tribune. She holds a BA Honours from SOAS and an MS from the School of Economics and London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. She has worked in the health and development sector in both UK and Bangladesh. Nadia is a member of The Whole Kahani, a collective of British writers of South Asian origin, and their anthology, Tongues and Bellies, was the winner of the Eastern Eye Award for Fiction. So welcome all to this panel. And I'm going to jump right in with my first question, which is how important is fiction when it comes to shaping and challenging power? And I asked this question specifically because in today's world, the craze seems to be for nonfiction. And a lot of people feel that, reading fiction is not important in any way. And keeping that in mind, I would like to ask all of you, and I would like all of you to answer this question, that how important is fiction when it comes to shaping and challenging powers? Do you believe it has the power to shift societal perceptions of authority and justice? Whoever would like to start off first?
Will I go?
Yeah, sure.
Great question. And actually, I mean, fiction is incredibly important for not only shaping, but also challenging power. I think any art form is important, whether it's, you have artists, you have poets, you have, writers. I mean, absolutely crucial, I would say. And the thing is that writing is its primary function, yes, absolutely, is to entertain, but it is also to inform and to educate. Because when you read a book, you get to live the lives of the characters. And I think if you're sort of confronted with data or statistics, you don't actually you can understand it on an intellectual level. You can see the numbers and you can go, this is terrible, or this is, but actually, if you are reading a story about a character or following the lives of people, then I think it actually makes you think about it and it makes
I
you
think you
feel.
connect with it better.
Absolutely. And I think that is so important. And I think that is what fiction can do. It gives you a glimpse into certain lives, certain situations, and it gets us to, it mirrors the society we live in or societies in the past, the power structures, the structure of, various society, everything, that's what fiction is there for, I think, apart from just to entertain us. And for example, I'm just reading V.V. Ganeshananthan's Brotherless Night, and it's about the Sri Lankan Civil War. Now, if I'm honest, I have a vague understanding of it, but now that I'm reading it, I'm really understanding what happened during that time and how Tamils were affected, what happened. And it's something which I think it's making me think about it, and sort of I'm feeling what they're feeling. I'm going through what they're going through. And I think that's something that, data just doesn't do. And also, I mean, it challenges power because it makes us think outside the box. It really kind of makes you kind of not just it makes you look inwards, but it also makes you look outwards. I mean, for example, I would say if you think about obvious one is 1984 by George Orwell. It makes you think about, a totalitarian state. And sadly, we are seeing that more and more these days, not naming any names, but, where, power is being taken away, but from the people. And it tells you of the dangers of unchecked power. And that's what we're actually seeing right now, And so I think fiction definitely has an important role in challenging power and also making people understand, And I think what we have to realize is that not all writing will be sort of political, and we have to understand that the responsibility is not necessarily on a writer to try and change things. I mean, that would be too much of, I think, of a burden on a writer. But yeah, absolutely. As a writer, you also have a responsibility to, when you're writing something, you have to take responsibility for what you are writing. And I really feel that we should, as writers, take the opportunity to reflect what is happening in the times that we live in, because that's what we've seen that writers in the past have done, and to learn from it and to try and, if possible, educate people, inform people as to what is happening around us. And hopefully that will plant seeds of change. It may not immediately have effect, but if you can even change the mind of one person, I think then you've done something important. So yeah, absolutely. I
True,
think it is crucial.
true, true. Aparna, I'd like to ask you your opinion also because you write both poetry and prose. So in that sense, what would you like to add to this?
Um, I feel, in fact, that fiction these days is more of a truth teller than nonfiction. To a very large extent, we live in states where a lot of news media, etc., has been subverted, and I do think fiction has a softer impact in that it lands better for people. It also kind of helps you to see the what if kind of effect. So
True.
while nonfiction would probably hit you like a hammer and say, this is what happened, A, B, C, D, E, fiction maybe would try and ask you to look a little bit further and maybe, in a sense, look inwards and think about how would it play out if this were to happen in such and such way. So, for example, whether it is 1984 or any other books like that, which are truth telling but told in a metaphorical form, I think it's extremely important for fiction to also subvert the mainstream mindset that we have, and to also take a good hard look at what's being sold to us, and make up your own mind about whether you want to follow that narrative or whether you're opening your mind to other narratives that may or may not be more relevant to you at that point of time. So I do think that fiction is extremely important as a voice of truth in today's age.
Okay. And like just a slightly different version of the question, OS, how do you feel that fiction can serve as a tool for exposing and challenging power structures? Like, how have novels or stories historically influenced political movements or social change?
Obviously, I would echo Nadia and Aparna here that fiction is I think, a very important tool in doing just that. And I'd actually quote one of my own novels, No Honor, which is about honor killings in Pakistan. And although it's a work of fiction, but a lot of fiction is rooted in reality. And a lot of people have come back to me saying that due to that novel, they have a much better understanding of what honor killings are like and what people actually feel. And exactly what Nadia was saying about that novel about the Sri Lankan civil war, that when you're reading a novel, you're with those characters, you're experiencing everything they are experiencing, which you cannot really see in non-fiction. So I think that fiction can play a very powerful role in not just informing people, but also in sort of it's in
Like creating an
provoking.
empathy.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. That's what I was trying to say. That they not just promote empathy, but also emotions that you might not see in non-fiction at all. So yeah, I feel that it is a very powerful tool, and historically, it's always been. If you look at historical novels that have been published in the last century or 2 centuries or wherever, whenever fiction has always proven to be a very important and valuable tool, especially in revolutions as well. So yeah, so I think the importance of fiction will never really lessen. So yeah.
Yeah. Sasha, would you just like to add anything to what everyone here has said so far? Like the role
Yes,
of fiction, in just holding up like a mirror and historically whatever role it has
yes.
played.
Unfortunately, I just at this moment when you came to me, I just have to run. I'm sorry for 2 minutes.
Okay. So
Please
I'll come back
continue.
to you a little later in a
Yes,
while.
please.
Okay. So I would also like to ask some individual questions based on your work. So Nadia, if I may ask you first, in your collection Truth or Dare, you explore complex human relationships and societal norms. So how do your stories reflect and challenge existing power structures within the cultures you depict? And also, since your stories are, they are placed in different settings, like you write stories between London and Dhaka, how do these settings influence the power dynamics among your characters?
Oh gosh, that's a that's a hefty question. I think being a British Bangladeshi, I always feel like I straddle two cultures, and I always feel like sometimes that I'm like an insider looking outwards, and then I'm an outsider looking inwards. So in a way, I feel like that gives me a sense of, what should I say, being almost Switzerland. I feel like I can write about, whether I'm writing about Bangladesh or I'm writing about the UK, I feel like I can do it without feeling sort of guilty either way. And I think what it is that as a journalist, I have written about various topics and issues in Bangladesh and in the UK. And for example, some of my stories deal with prostitution, homelessness, begging. It deals with sort of, oppressing women's rights, and I think by writing these things, giving a voice to these people, I feel that it challenges power structure by sort of highlighting these things. You don't talk about prostitution. Prostitution is not something that, it's almost a taboo subject. It's hidden. It's swept under the carpet because you don't want to deal with it. You don't want to talk about it. But these are people who live in our society, and that, we need to give them the place in society that they are due. Prostitution has been there for as long as, I think one can go back.
One of
And
the world's oldest professions, if one may say so.
exactly, right? So, and by giving them a voice, I feel like I am challenging the power structure by saying, no, look at this. We need to talk about these things. I write about a homeless young man in the UK, and I want to highlight this because I think it is an issue. And now living in the UK, if you go around the streets, there are so many homeless people. You will see tents pitched up everywhere, and it's just getting worse. And these are also things that I feel as a writer, through storytelling, I can highlight these things. And I think it gives me, because also I write about a beggar in Bangladesh, so it's universal. It is not something that
Exactly.
happens in one country and not another country. So it's sort of, it shows you that it's not a cultural issue. It is not it's not necessarily something that is very sort of, limited to a country, and that it's universal. And I think, we need to tackle that. And I think through my writing, I hope that I kind of get people to think about these things and to also realize that, as a society, we need to do something about it. And we can do something about it, even if it's by writing about it, reading about it, making it widely known, or talking to other people about it. So I hope I've answered your question.
Yes. Thank you so much.
If I can just now, I just want to
Yes,
say,
lovely.
I think the proof is actually in the number of books that are banned historically. So we only have to look at that to see how ideas in fiction have challenged political entities, societal entities, and made them actually afraid. And that's why books that are banned, they teach us everything we need to know about the power of fiction.
That's a very good way of highlighting it. The books that have been banned are obviously seen as a challenge to the existing power structure. So that's a really excellent point you've raised, Sasha, because honestly, when I think of the way fiction challenges, I don't normally immediately think in terms of banned books, but you're very right. That's really a very direct way of seeing how it challenges power, fiction.
Yeah. So I think in that respect, there's no letting up of that. Like you were saying, okay, create nonfiction is, in some areas of publishing, perhaps it's but the power of fiction to really make institutions sort of cower is very much there. And I mean, there's a lot of sensitivities around it for particular countries, like Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, all of these countries. Anyone who speaks truth to power does automatically come under some kind of, radar. So whereas I personally may not have faced resistance or censorship in that way. However, I never wrote. I did fear it when I was doing some nonfiction, and I was told, oh, this stuff you're writing, you shouldn't be writing it. I was told that. And I did stop the
Okay,
particular thing that I was doing
that you were working on.
because my family was still in Pakistan, and I know how things go. We all do when we come from these type of places. I've specifically lost people I know for these reasons. So I think the artistic freedom is one thing. And also, you have to think about how it's spoken of in Western society. There's this big thing, oh, freedom. There was an incident with anyway, I won't go into it, but Philip Pullman writing a tweet in defense of a author who was sort of being racist. And everyone started talking about freedom of expression. But when you come from oppressed nations like, Pakistan, whatever, where it's a different thing. Freedom is not the same thing. Sure, you can stand for it, but the dangers that you face are much more tangible.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sasha. So we're just going to continue, and I'm just going to be asking some individual questions so that the viewers of this panel can get to know your particular works also in greater detail. So Awais, my next question is to you. Your novels often portray the intricacies of Pakistani society in The Shadows of Love. How do you address the influence of societal expectation on individual choices, and what commentary does this provide on power dynamics?
Thank you. This is a very important but also very complicated question. So I'm not sure I'm fully equipped to answer it. But you see, that's the thing about Pakistan, that every decision you make, every step you take in life is informed by societal expectations. I mean, I can't even imagine how bad it is for women in Pakistan. As a man, I'm telling you that everything I've done up till my, I think, early 30s actually. I'm in my late 30s now, but up to my early 30s, everything was based on what my family wanted, what they wanted me to do. And that is how life is in Pakistan, that even as a man, I was doing everything according to societal expectations. So that is what I try to show in my books as well, especially in The Shadows of Love, where the main characters are now in their 50s and 60s, that even now, at this age, they are still slaves to societal expectations, and they're all afraid of log kya kahenge, that all of that really plays a part into how we live our lives here in Pakistan, and I'm sure in India and Bangladesh as well, probably the world over. So I really wanted to show that societal expectations don't just after you were past your teenage or 20s, they're actually with you throughout your life. And it's a constant struggle to get past them. And that's what I try to show in my characters as well, how they try to get past the whole societal expectation and how that gives them that individual strength that you were talking about. Yeah, that would be my answer.
Okay, thank you so much. My next question, Aparna, is for you. Your work delves into various facets of Indian society. So how do cultural contexts within your stories amplify or mitigate the effects of power imbalances?
Again, fantastic question, I have to say, and a real head scratcher. Definitely, I'd say that the stories that I tell try to amplify the power imbalances that exist within personal relationships in cultural context, being specifically India. But as Awais said, it's all countries that are basically come under more of a totalitarian kind of not a regime, but the way we think, the way we portray ourselves, and the way we are seen to lead our lives. We do have very set expectations that are gender based, that are caste based, that are economic based. And within that setup, power structures are born that are then grouted into society. And it's almost like it's epigenetically ingrained in us. We're born in a certain situation, and the way we view outside society as well as what's going on within the four walls of our house, it's very heavily dictated by those epigenetics that come to us through this kind of percolating down of societal rules. In my book, specifically in Instruments of Torture, I've used the metaphor of medieval instruments of torture to actually try and show simple relationships and how those relationships are affected by the power imbalances that take place. So, for example, in a married couple, it's a simple gender role dynamic that then gets subverted if the woman tries to step out of her particular role. And that by itself, why I've kind of collated it to an instrument of torture, why I've uh, kind of put it parallel to an instrument of torture, is because we so easily normalize these gender roles, and we so easily normalize caste roles and say this is what we're born to, what is the harm in just following this role, without seeing the kind of immense damage, the immense trauma, the immense we're literally going back by centuries when we follow these roles. So what I've tried to do in Instruments of Torture is take simple everyday relationships, simple everyday people existing in urban and suburban India, and trying to put their personal relationships at the forefront and say that, all right, you know what, you may not view this as being something that needs to be addressed. For example, something like depression is not really addressed in Indian society, especially within a marriage. The power dynamic between a wife and her in-laws, a wife and her husband, is such that if the wife is grappling with mental health issues, she's very often told that, think yourself out of it, or come on, buck up, you can find a way out of it. So something as simple as that, I've collated it to a form of torture. It's in a sense something that leads a woman to take a very dire step at the end of a very, very simple road that people may not view as being such a big thing. It's a simple act. It's a simple act of the husband taking away the pills from the woman and putting them away and saying, you don't need these pills anymore. And then realizing that that could lead to disastrous consequences. So that's what I've tried to do in the book, is to kind of say, think further than what your roles are kind of boxing you into, and look further and actually see if you can find what if, and go further from there and see how you could actually justify your position of power within that. Pick yourself out of that, look at where you are in this complex web of societal relations that we have for ourselves. And that's where I think Instruments of Torture is trying to make a point. I'm sorry, that's a very convoluted answer, but I
No,
hope
no,
I
thank you so much. Because again, I think the beauty of fiction is that we are able to take something which is very simple and present it in a different way, which makes people think about it in a different way. And I think that's where fiction really gains its strength, because it is able to make people connect or make people think in a different way. And I think it's really fantastic the way you have tried to connect, like Instruments of Torture in that book, like the actual instruments of torture and this, because that's a very different way of looking at it and thereby highlighting it. Okay, so I'm going to ask a quick question. Sasha, I wanted to ask you about your work. So in your book of Necessity and Wanting, and in your translation of Hijab Imtiaz's work, both books highlight voices that aren't always heard. So how do you think storytelling, especially, through fiction and translation, how can that help bring forgotten or overlooked stories to light?
To be honest, I consider my storytelling and my translation work specifically as my activism. Um, and I very much think of it that way, like even before I've begun. So I've always written in an experimental style, or been told that I do. For me, I'm just writing. But then with Of Necessity and Wanting, it was very specific to highlighting very specific issues within Pakistani society that I felt were not touched upon because of the what I saw as the dominance of sort of bourgeoisie narratives of fiction, because Pakistan being very different in terms of publishing from India. Um, Nascent is possibly the word for its publishing industry. So, you know, Pakistani authors have traditionally resorted to Western publishers who have then favored very specific narratives. So, Pakistanis writing about Pakistanis for Pakistanis is still in English, let's say, is still it's not even it's a very small proportion. Um, so that was my starting point. Was I said, what is going on? Why are there no stories about people that are not posh, are not bougie, and I saw the beauty salon as a very interesting device for that, because within that vehicle, I got to speak about um, two of the main issues that are, on my activism agenda. One is colorism, and uh, this specifically skin whitening, which I see as a post-colonial sort of trauma that we continue to perpetuate and inflict on ourselves. And also, the sort of class divide. So, that was a vehicle, that collection of short stories. I wrote about water, about how, in Pakistan, our water is not potable. Um, we can die. Same, we die from our water, which is, these are stories that are not looking for Western audiences. I know it's different. It is different for India. It's very interesting to me, this development of literature. With my translation work is similar. Growing up in Pakistan, I was not privy to my own literary culture, specifically feminist, or even one woman, even one, not even one. ठीक है, मतलब उर्दू lessons आप पढ़ रहे हो, मीर तकी मीर, इकबाल, fine, great. But so then when I discovered hijab imtiaz at the grand, old age of 38 or something, I was just blown away. I was just blown away. And I thought that, imagine, had I been exposed to this woman, my whole life would have changed. Now, this is another thing about fiction, is that one book can change your life, especially if
Yes.
it comes to you when you are at the right time. You see? So with that in mind, I said I have to translate Hijab Imtiaz, because the majority of people who are reading English has exponentially grown. They may never read hijab in Urdu. जिन्होंने पढ़ना है उर्दू में वो पढ़ लिया होगा. But and it was probably one of the greatest experiences of my life, translating hijab and receiving a grant from the Arts Council in the UK to travel to Lahore and speak to her family.
That's great. That's really
Askia,
great.
can I just add one thing to what Sasha
sure.
said before about book bans? It's interesting because obviously I've not had anything banned, but it's how if you try and change the narrative it's not necessarily from the state, it can be from readers and it can be from publishers, gatekeepers, where you get the pushback. And I have one story which I wrote called The Skin You Wear, and it deals with white supremacists. And I wanted to turn the narrative and say, well, this happens to South Asians or Black people. And what happened was it was for an anthology that we'd been asked to write for. And the editor a white, middle-aged white man, said it was problematic, that my story was problematic. And then he went on to tell me how in the UK we do not have white supremacists or neo-Nazism. And I just thought, what planet are you living on, you know? And they didn't publish that story. So
Oh, really?
ultimately, yeah, they didn't publish it because as it was problematic. And I was told that this, doesn't exist, it blew my mind that this man could tell me that it doesn't exist in the UK. And, come on, we've had the British National Front, we've had all these neo-Nazi groups, how can you say that to me? But he just didn't want to address that issue. And so they didn't publish it. But luckily, my publisher, Renard Press, they did publish it, which I'm very thankful for, because I was wondering whether I would get pushback from them as well. But no questions asked. It was, published. But these are things that we do face because you try and change the narrative. And sometimes you're like, people go, nope, sorry, because they don't want to deal with it, address it. And that is a power struggle, if you ask me, And as a
That's true.
writer, sometimes you just have to push back as well and say, no, and so I'm glad that I got that published. I didn't say, oh, I'm not going to try, because it was important to me to say, look, this happens, these things happen. And, I would like, the world or even one reader to read it and go, oh my God, okay, So I just wanted to add that censorship is at every level. It's not just state
That's very
censorship,
true. That's
I
very
love
true.
it.
And
Clearly, your editor has never been spat on in a British bus, has he?
Absolutely, Well, he was exactly.
I mean, he's a
Told
white
what to
person, so
speak or
obviously
do.
he's not
Yeah.
going to face it. Yes, Awais, you were saying something.
Yeah. I was just echoing Aparna that I actually experienced that when I was in a restaurant in London, very high-end restaurant, and I was talking on the phone with my mother. I was speaking in Urdu, and this white person, middle, I think elderly white person, came up to me and he's like, stop speaking in this effing language. And this is not the place for it. And I'm like, okay, fine. I was so shocked I couldn't even say anything. That's how it hits you. And then later you're like, I should have said this, I should have said that. But at that moment, you can't even say anything. It's so shocking. So yeah, so
Yeah,
it
I
does
think it's
exist.
just like you said, a lot of the time it happens at a point of time when you don't expect it, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
there are certain occasions where you might be mentally prepared that maybe I will get to hear it. Or like
Yeah.
you said, Nadia, like if you have been asked to write a story and you publish it, you might be prepared that people will have a problem with it. You don't
Yes.
expect that gatekeeping to start right from someone saying this story doesn't work. Because ultimately we're talking about fiction. So for a person to say
Exactly.
that this story doesn't make sense, you really have to think, how can this story not make sense? I mean, you can say that your facts are wrong, but how do you say a piece of fiction doesn't work? So,
Yeah.
Exactly.
and that happens everywhere. And I think like when Sasha talked about banned books, the one thing that came to my mind is if you look at the books that are banned, they also tell you what were the important issues at that point of time. Because many books which were banned in, say, 80s, we read them
Yes.
now and we go, well, why were they banned? It doesn't make any sense to us. And maybe 20 years from now, 30 years from now, people will look at stuff that was not being published or was being banned now, and they'll go, well, I mean, why was this being banned? This is so innocuous. So I think it's
Yeah.
also like
Books are
we said,
still
look at the
being banned, though. Sorry to
exactly.
interrupt.
Oh,
And the
Yeah.
books that were banned, some of them are still banned, and they're
Yeah.
also banned in other countries. So, Jesse, did you all know that Rupi Kaur was banned in Texas, for example?
I
No,
think
okay,
I
that I did
heard
not know.
something like that.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Rupi
And
Kaur is banned in Texas.
I mean, now the US, they're banning every book left, right, and center. It's madness,
But in Texas specifically,
That's bizarre.
because
That
of
is
the
bizarre.
power of her
Yeah.
words.
Yeah.
They don't want it. Ab dekho, Muhammad Hanif in Pakistan.
yeah.
Yeah.
The
Hmm.
publisher that was going to translate his work into Urdu was burnt down before it was about to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Don't
even
tell me there's no power in fiction, right, Awais?
no, absolutely. I was just echoing you in that look at the state of things between Pakistan and India. Even though we're published in India, not a single book comes into Pakistan. So
Yeah.
that still exists. It's been 5, 6 years now,
Yeah.
and the trade ban is still going strong. And I think it's just going to get stronger from now, from what's
Yeah.
happened. But yeah,
It's
Can I
And
sad.
interrupt?
Jyoti, I
Sorry.
do have sorry, something
Yeah.
completely slightly different to add here is also once you're published, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not shadow banning, but that people will not be reductive of your work. So, for example, when Instruments of Torture came out, there was an interview that was conducted with me very early on, and the entire podcast was reduced to talking about my book as if it was something smutty because it deals with several issues that we are very taboo still in Indian society. And it was actually titled as Of Lust and Fetishes. And I was thinking that's such an extremely reductive narrative. And I wonder if I were a man, whether this would be the exact title they would give to this podcast. And since my first book of poetry came out, which was also again, it was reviewed extremely favorably. I was very grateful and lucky for that. But a lot of people spoke about how once you get past all of the boning in the narrative, then it's a fantastic narrative. And that just made me think about why can't you look at it as a whole rather than look at it and think, all right, you know what, this part we should bleep out, whereas the rest of it is fine with, we're fine with it. So even though you're not banning the work, you're actually casting aspersions on why is this person, literally on the person's gender and on the person's character for writing a book which is pretty much will not hold any bars. It's a it speaks about several things that Indian society considers extremely taboo. And coming from the Pakistani and Bangladeshi narrative, you guys would understand completely what I'm speaking about. So I faced that kind of a thing from the very beginning. Even though I've been very lucky with my publishers being extremely supportive, there has been the outside media that has been question mark, question mark. And even though they've said, oh, the writing is essentially good, however, couldn't you have done it without mentioning so and so thing? No, I couldn't have. It was a decision I took as an artist. Either you respect that or look at my art in a more holistic way. Sorry.
That's true. So there's always this kind of desire to, I think, control the voice. You know what you are saying, and it's not just what you're saying, it's also about how you are saying it. So I think
And if I
society,
was a powerful white man, if I would say the same thing, would it be perceived as that? Absolutely not. This I'm 100% sure of.
yeah.
Or if
No,
even I
then you're
was
a
a powerful Indian
maverick.
man,
Then you're
then
a
I'm
maverick.
exactly. Yes, absolutely. Then I'm a one-off genius who dares to say the truths that none of us are able to see. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's really true.
Oh, I'm
So
going to interrupt again. Sorry, you're going to kick me off the session.
no,
But I was
I
just thinking
Not
about,
at
you
all.
said historically, I think you asked a question of whether it has caused social change or not. One thing that does come to mind is, I think was it in 1852 that Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's
Uncle
Cabin,
Tom's
and
Cabin.
that highlighted, the atrocities of slavery, and it actually, I think, was instrumental in the abolitionist movement. I can't say that properly. And apparently, Abraham Lincoln, I don't know whether this is true, but reportedly he said that, oh, you're the little woman who started
Yes.
this war. So yeah, actually, fiction does have an impact, and it can cause social change, and it can start revolution. So absolutely, whatever we're saying, fiction is so important to challenging power.
Yes. I've read that. I don't know how true it is, whether
Exactly,
Lincoln
but it
actually
sounds
said
good.
or not. But it's a lovely
But
thing to,
Exactly.
lovely
clearly,
anecdote.
Fruity Core in Texas is still happening. It just
Yeah.
shows us that's insane, fascinating, and insane.
Exactly. So just moving on, I'm going to ask, I was going to ask whether any of you have faced resistance or censorship, but we've already talked about that. So I'm just going to talk about, I'm just going to ask you about with things changing the way they are, like we have digital storytelling, social media. Do you think, the role of fiction is changing, like we have AI coming up and all that. So in that, how do you see the role of fiction changing? If I can start with you, Awais, because you work in creative writing, you do teach creative writing. So how do you think all this impacts writing? Like the whole, because people now say that we don't read that much. We have a shorter attention span and stuff like that. Do you think it impacts?
That much is very true, actually. If you look at all across the industry and among readers, people have shorter attention spans. And because of that, you will see that the focus is from agents and publishers. It's on great opening pages that hook you right in and then, refuse to let you go. And I mean, literary fiction and maybe classics, people will always have time for classics. But if you're writing today, like a classic, so that might not get the attention of a publisher or agent precisely because of this, that there isn't that much time because it's also technologically advanced and we have so much to distract us. Apart from that, with AI, the thing is that as things stand right now, obviously AI is going to change a lot over the next coming years, and it's hard to say what the impact would be. But right now, it's if you look at the AI generated work, it's really shoddy. You can tell it's AI, and
Yeah.
I feel that originality, you cannot take away originality from anyone, from someone. So I think that will always shine through. If you've actually written the book, that will always shine through. But it is concerning in many ways that anyone can today ask ChatGPT to whip together some words and then publish it on Amazon and something. So I think the Amazon aspect will become pretty tough. The
Yes.
mainstream publishers will always be very, I think they will prioritize people who've actually written the book. But I think it's the problem is with Amazon. That is where things might get really confusing because an ordinary reader will not know whether this has been written by an actual author or if it's AI generated. So that might cause problems. But as of now, if you look at their work, the work that AI comes up with, it's not really good. So yeah, so it's hard
That's
to
true.
say.
But
Yeah.
I think it's also very interesting that on the one hand, we have a shortening attention span. And on the other hand, I see publishing firms saying, they would don't want to publish short story collections because apparently
Yeah.
they say they don't sell. So I
Yeah.
find that, like these are two different things. Like, how do they then
I'll
come
tell
together?
you. I'll tell you one of the answers to this. So short stories, that's always been the case. Short stories have always been very difficult to publish. Part of the reason is that when you read something, a lot of people feel that they want, especially when you're reading fantasy or sci-fi, they want to immerse themselves in the world. And once they get an understanding of the world, the story ends. And that is what a lot of people take issue with. And that is why short stories are a bit niche in that regard, because people feel that we should, now that we've invested in the characters, we want to stick with those characters for a longer time. So that is always, I mean, at least I feel that's the reason. But Nadia would probably know better because she's published one.
Like, would anyone like to add, like what do you see as the future for fiction, Like I was
I
asking always, just because of AI and shorter attention spans, and like it's just so many more challenges for you as a writer.
Well,
So
to
do
be honest,
any of you? Yeah, yes,
I
Sasha.
well, I think we have to be careful with what we sort of take on as what's true and what's not true, because what happens a lot is because we are absolutely flooded with information at any given moment, it's very hard to discern what is, because there is no one thing going on. So everything is happening at the same time. So, for example, every week almost, an author is posting on social media how their work has been stolen. And there's plenty.